it's been a pleasure to find you online, and to follow your tweets and your activity on social media. I really love that you're always very positive and supportive, even when sometimes maybe you don't agree 100% with things, And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today, because I find that so refreshing when a person online is able to always politely maybe share ideas, don't be so negative. James, welcome today. Thank you so much for taking some time to discuss with me cool stuff. And who is James O'Neill, and why did you call your project or your website Free Shannon?
Well,
long story.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm who I am. As I've gotten into politics, I've become more acutely aware of my privilege. So that's been quite a thing. I'm white, male, American, middle class my whole life. And I just recently got a very good job. So I've got good pay. I've always had health care. I've never had to worry about things. We weren't the sort of middle class where we took vacations. So we never did that, but paid for my own glasses and got my own computer. So we were well enough to not be suffering, but not having any sort of extravagance. So my parents are conservative, but they never indoctrinated us into conservatism or religion. We stopped going to church when I was like 8 or 9. It was a Methodist church. So I was very fortunate to not have that indoctrination. Then later on in life, I was able to, make that determination myself. But as a part of that privilege that I grew up with, and also part of that lack of indoctrination, I was very much against politics, very much against religion in general, because of the horrors inflicted by both. I mean, they both are corrupt, and nothing good has ever come of it. So went to high school, barely passed, and I went into the Navy for 6 years under the Naval Nuclear Power Program to try and find the most difficult thing I could do so I could prep myself to go to college. That worked well. And then I went into college for computer programming, got my bachelor's in that. Then I worked for a small county government for about 19 years. But kind of at the beginning of me working for the government, I met my wife, and then we got married, and then that was about 2005. And shortly after that, I started getting into politics because it was the gay marriage movement, specifically the Proposition 8 trials here in California. Mm-hmm. That's what got me started. And then I started studying religion and getting into politics, and I studied Christian history and philosophy, theology, looking at evolutionary psychology, biology, constitutional law, all sorts of that stuff, just to try and figure out what the fuck their problem is with gay people getting married. I mean, it's just, oh my God. So after that, I got into racism and poverty and minimum wage, and then U.S. imperialism, and it kind of just exploded out from there. So that's kind of my journey into politics. And then Free Xenon, that comes from my time in the Navy, actually. I have a whole blog post talking about that because people always ask about it. Basically, when I did my only run to the Mediterranean for 6 months, you're on board with a bunch of cranky, bitter, jaded sailors, and the people in my division were envisioning the reactor vessel as this evil thing that was imprisoning this like fairy sort of creature, xenon, because xenon is one of the elements, fission product elements. What do they call it? Well, it's a product of the fission process that builds up in the reactor. So they're like, free xenon from the evil reactor vessel, sort of a thing. So it kind of just comes from that.
So it's like a byproduct of nuclear reactors?
Yes. It builds up over 70 hours. It's a fission product poison, meaning it reduces the number of fission reactions that happen by sucking up neutrons.
So free xenon will be equivalent to free the poison or something like that, maybe? Free a contaminant? Is that the play of words? the
No,
meaning
no, no.
behind it?
No, nothing like that. They were just envisioning Xenon as a fairy imprisoned by the evil reactor vessel. That's all.
Oh, I
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Great. Well, thank you for telling us. Like, I mean, so many learning, right? Your journey into learning different disciplines. It's amazing. I would love you to also talk about the military because having been there, I think I see the military today as a very almost, I mean, negative. Of course.
Of
No,
course,
not
of
just
course.
not just the politicians, like, but almost like anybody engaging right now, like going to the military, like you have to be very. I don't want to be put this very negative connotation. I don't want to be get to the personal level, but everybody knows today that most wars are for profit. It's like an enterprise. So going into the military thinking that you are defending your country or that you are doing something noble, it's just very hard for me, a very hard pill for me to swallow in the 21st century.
I would disagree with that.
Okay.
To honestly, like you and I, we are in a position of, what we call intellectual privilege. We understand how things work. Like I didn't know any of this stuff before I joined the military. All I want to do is go to college, right? Because it's that position of privilege. So many Americans are in positions of privilege because we're Americans and we are the largest terrorist organization in the world. And we have the entire media arm as a part of the propaganda arm for the U.S. military industrial complex, the fossil fuel industry, pharmaceutical industry, the banking industry, right? So Americans are very heavily propagandized. It's only just the few of us like us that really understand what's going on because they sell patriotism, they sell, the othering of Russia and all the other countries, right? So it's to be in the know and understand what's going on is a position of privilege, and we are, very few. The rest of us have been propagandized to believe whatever is most profitable for the corporations that control our country.
Right, but it's undeniable that you can go to YouTube and you can do that for free. You can even do it if you don't have any money, and just look up some documentaries about what the military is all about. Now, is that going to change your whole upbringing and your whole education indoctrination? Probably not, because we are mostly emotional beings, right? So if your parents raise you, telling you that these are patriotic America and whatever, but the information is out there, and sometimes I've seen it, when it just something clicks. So it's not like 25 years ago when you really didn't have so many options to look into things by yourself. So I will give people today a little bit more responsibility than maybe 25 years ago when they went totally blind into things. But today, you know what? An 18-year-old, he can go into the public high school and fire up a Google page and just look up for things for himself too.
Yeah, but they have to want to. But I will say today's generation is definitely a lot more knowledgeable, and I think they're a lot more progressive. So I think the younger generations will have that, and they are already of that same mind, which is good. But it's kind of like my generation or the generation before. We didn't grow up with that. We're kind of the ones who really faced that propaganda and wouldn't look for it. My whole family is conservative. They're all just blindly, into the Kool-Aid, and I'm the black sheep of the family, right?
Right.
So that's kind of like that generation. Those two generations are going to be problematic, and the younger generations kind of do see the light. So, sure, yeah, I'll agree with that.
Definitely, there's a transition in here. You know, it's still like you said, there is so much indoctrination. It just comes from everywhere. Same thing with the police. You should have a job, right? And go every day to your job and do your best. And when somebody, sometimes your manager, whatever that is, if it's in whatever company or in the police, tells you to do something that goes against your values, I think that's a cultural change that needs to happen too. You should stand for yourself and say, no, I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna go and hit that person. I'm not gonna go and just because you're in the police, or you're in the military, I'm gonna go into this country, and just because I believe and I don't want to really look into things in detail. I'm going to go and do this mission, or I'm going to like, it's a paycheck. They don't own your soul. What do you think?
Well, having a sense of morality is a privilege. Most people don't have that privilege. And of course, we've got the propaganda, right? And also there is this concept that once you become a part of the systems of control, military, army, government, banking, right, religion, then you start becoming basically one with the board. You become one with the systems of control, and then you therefore start losing that sense of community, and you become basically sociopathic. So people who become part of the police become part of systems of control, and they become sociopathic. And then it's not about service to the public, it's about making sure that they are controlling the people in a way that best serves the 1%. There's because that propaganda that is a part of the training, part of, like the entire Hollywood is all about propaganda. Like movies are about propagandizing people to believe in the police, right, and to believe in the U.S. military and patriotism, all that sort of thing. So the indoctrination that is present throughout the entire U.S. media complex, including movies and stuff like that, makes it almost a religious, if not reverential thing to become a part of the police and to have that position of authority and power over others.
Right. And there are a couple of things that I thought about while you were talking about the Stanford experiment. I'm sure you've heard of it, right? Which kind of like proves that any person given some power, like we just turn into a little bit into sociopaths a little bit.
Yes.
I'm not saying all of us, but those experiments have been conducted a few times, and it's interesting how a good majority does that. But you also said morality is a privilege, didn't you? Just the exact quote.
Yes.
To what extent? Because that's something I would like to wrestle with. Is it? I mean, we've seen like so many examples of like people like, I know when you're hungry and you want to get money, is your paycheck, and you're just gonna like look the other way and do your thing. You don't want to lose your job. But what is there must be a line somewhere, and to what extent is a privilege?
To the extent that you can afford it.
So do you think like humans will do whatever it takes just to put like food in their mouth, or?
Yeah, that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I mean, if you are in a position where your family is starving and you have no job prospects or anything like that, I mean, you don't want to die, right? You don't want your family, your kids to die, so you got to find food. It's kind of all a part of, the survival instinct.
It is, but I don't think it's that clear cut. I think that humans have this discerning like part of their brain, it's we're not like pure animals. I mean, and at some point, I mean, there are many examples in history, right? People just, I mean, the heroes in history, they will put their lives on the line just to save the community. And don't get me wrong, going back to the whole military, like the men and women in the military are really brave, and many times they just give their lives for a bigger purpose. What is unfortunate in my view is like maybe they think their ideal that they are representing is very positive, and perhaps it's not, and that's what is like shameful, and that's what is like makes me sad, that they are like giving their lives away for something that maybe is not what they think it is. So my hat's off to all of them, but that's just an example of people doing things that are risky, that goes against their survival instinct, is my point.
Yeah, but generally those people that are the exception, not the rule.
Do we need to, like, what we, you and I, and most people are online trying to change the culture and change the values, is like, hey, we need to raise the game, we need to raise the awareness. Can we all be a little bit in our lives just those people? Can we just not like go with the game just for a paycheck? Can we just raise the bar? And can we create a culture where everybody sees that? Because just following orders, just following your most basic instinct of, yeah, I need a paycheck, so I'm going to do whatever I'm told by my manager, like, this is not a full human right there, aware, it's just like just a person that lives, that thrives maybe, but it's not like really there. And there's so much depression, there's so much like anxiety, and I think that's because there's this conflict, this between us, this little guy telling us one thing, and the other guy telling us, no, I need to the paycheck, I need to. So that's why I want to explore these, because we cannot just go to accept the bare minimum of humans. We need to raise the bar and call it for what it is. Just because it's been like that forever and ever, that's not acceptable to me. We just need to, and sure, I speak from a point of privilege. Well, somebody has to. Even if I have the privilege, I have
100%.
the reason to do it. I mean, I have the privilege to also speak about it, right?
That's why I blog, because I'm in a position of privilege, as I have been on my whole life. And I'm like, the shit's fucked up. So typey. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So the other thing that I wanted, so many things I wanted to discuss with you, and going back to my initial point, is because it seems like you're cool with everything, right? And agree to explore and open to things. So, and on your website there, guys, go to his website. It's so cool, has so many interesting things. But I was trying to pick up the things that we could be more controversial between you and I, just kind of like to argue about it a little bit, and just to show everybody that even though maybe we disagree on things, we can still agree on moving forward. Like, right, exactly, and just we want the same things at the end of the day, right? Abundance, freedom, happiness, just love each other, community, and all those good stuff. So, atheists, why are atheists so angry, right?
Such a great presentation.
So, dude, it really, I see them being angry and attacking like religion so much, right? And I think there is a place also for religion, and sure, the history of religion can show us like how much damage, but it has done a lot of good for a lot of people too. So is there like a compromise here? Is there like a place where we can just not attack religion and just, what do you think?
Did you read my post on religion?
Well, you talk about morality without religion.
Yes, that was the precursor to my post on religion overview.
Okay, but why don't you tell us about it?
Okay, so all right, so in that post, where I talk, that's titled Religion and Overview, I state that superstition and religion is an evolutionary adaptation to deal with ignorance and suffering, specifically ignorance on like our hunter forebears. They didn't know anything about the weather, the stars, disease, any of that sort of stuff. So as a way of coping with their ignorance on how the world works, superstition and religion was created as a coping mechanism. And in the post, I also say that we can't move to a world beyond religion until we get rid of suffering and ignorance. And that can't be done within capitalism. It can only be done basically within a resource-based economy. But even within a resource-based economy, you're never going to get rid of religion either, because one of the other drivers for belief in religion and superstition is existential dread, existential awe, right? And just this core human desire to be part of something larger. Resource-based economy, I would expect that religion, believers would be a social curiosity. They would be in the minority, just because a highly educated populace, the more educated you are, the less of the less ignorance you have, so the less need there is for that superstition and religion as a coping mechanism.
Now, I kind of think the opposite would happen if we can distinguish between religion and spirituality. Is that a distinction that you make or not? Or to you, everything is just religious thought, like believing in the supernatural, believing in metaphysics, to you all of that is religious? Or is there a room for spirituality?
I haven't quite thought about it from that standpoint. I know, like, my wife is spiritual but not religious. She teaches yoga, so I get that standpoint. But still, that spirituality is still, shall we say, believing in something that doesn't exist. Magic doesn't exist. Believing that stuff, you're believing in something that still doesn't exist. Now, depending, so spirituality is less harmful than religion because it's not as organized.
Mm-hmm.
It's very individual. So, sure.
So I think in the future, probably there will be, most people will be spiritual, and the minority will be those who don't believe in the, let's call it the metaphysical world. And
Okay.
you said like something that doesn't exist. But this debate has been going on for centuries. It's not like atheists just came up with the ultimate, here's proof, there is nothing beyond the physical world. It's just not there, that reason. And that's why this is interesting. And that's why to me it's interesting that atheists get so angry, because you can only get angry with something that to you is like 100%, but there's not 100% in this debate. There's
So
not such a thing.
for a lot of atheists, and if you read through that entire presentation, one of the things she gets to at the end, and this is really what resonated with me, is that so many non-believers are non-believers not because of rage against things that don't exist. It's because they are angry at harms that are inflicted upon others. It's a anger driven by compassion, which is where I'm at as well. So she goes, there's just a tremendous amount of evidence for that sort of thing, like the horrors inflicted upon believers in Christianity by the Christian, especially within the Catholic Church, right? So it's not so much, well, at least for many of us, it's not harms inflicted upon me, but because I haven't had any issues with religion in my life, it's just the rage that I feel for and the compassion that I have for the horrors inflicted upon others.
Right. I mean, 100% that religions, I mean, we have had like wars in the name of religion. How ridiculous is that, right? Here, I love my God, God loves me, whatever, but let me go, because I love you, let me go and kill these people that, I mean, and that is just the ultimate like nonsense. But I think like the atheist movement throws the baby with the water and falls into this oversimplification of what the metaphysical world is, and falls into the traps of religions. Because I agree, like religions just come in like all colors and shapes, and not all of them can be true, right? So these whole like debates and conflicts that they have, I mean, that's just not really it doesn't make sense. Some of the things that they try to defend, but there is much more than that. And a person that is highly spiritual and has had experience of other things that go beyond the matter, because beyond these five senses, knows in his experiential world that there is something else. And I think more and more people are getting into this. And I find that in the future, that will probably be the case. And the good thing about this spiritual world is like, it goes beyond all the religions. It's kind of like a unifying field. It's like the laws of physics, right? It doesn't matter where you're from. The laws of physics are what they are, right? Gravity, whether you're in the United States or in China, is the same. Well, they are also metaphysical laws, and that has to do with thought, that has to do with chakras and other things, energies. Your wife, you said she practices yoga. Do you think all of these people practicing yoga, doing all kinds of things with their inner bodies, whatever you want to call it, are just full of it? Like all of that is just rubbish that doesn't exist, that they are fooling themselves? How is it possible that so many people in different places at different times in history have had those same experiences about the non-tangible? How do you explain that?
Well, it's to an extent mass psychosis and the propagandizing of them, right? Because it's just, they spend, thousands of years brainwashing people into believing this thing. If you don't believe this, you're going to hell, right? There's this whole heaven-hell dichotomy. Like with yoga specifically, there is definitely a lot of scientific backing for. So it's not so much metaphysical belief, right? It's just it's physical practice, meditation, right? It's the mind and the body and kind of engaging in a practice which helps to keep you healthy in many ways.
So you don't think there is like a non-local field of thoughts in the planet where it's not something tangible that you can touch and measure, but we are affecting this. Have you heard of these experiments where they've done experiments where they just put like people to meditate, right? and they have an effect on the let's call it this non-local field, right, of thought.
Yeah.
And there are different names that have been given to this. So it has to do with awareness, like our awareness has an influence on this field and our thoughts too. If we're more positive, we're more negative. Kind of like when you go into a concert, right? And you just feel there's something there. It's not tangible, maybe something you cannot measure, but there's something in the air, right? So how about all those things? How about all those experiments that go beyond the physics? It's metaphysics. It's just all like superstition, like you said. It's all like, are you 100% of that? Because when you give me those responses, you just came with superstition, like indoctrination, like assuming it's 100% false. You cannot prove that.
Well, of course not. You can't prove a negative. That's kind of one of the things, right? But as far as the meditation thing, I've read about that too. That's really interesting. I don't have an answer for that. I mean, it happened. It's a thing. I don't know. It's interesting. It could very well be a thing. I've considered the concept of what do I call it? Like a collective. I'll say it. Collective intellectual kind of energy of sorts, but I've only given it just limited thought. I don't know. I can't explain it. It's something I've considered, but I don't know. I really don't know. I really don't know.
I mean, that's cool. Like we cannot know everything, right? But to me, that's the way I see it. Is like, okay, so we have this physical world, right? And when we have this metaphysical world, we don't really know about much, but there is something there. And there are experiments that tell us that empirically, even though we don't have a theory about it, we don't understand how to measure, to touch it, all of those things, but empirically we observe things, right? And these people meditate and they create these things. And to me, that's part of that metaphysical world, right? And it's there, it exists. So that's why,
for me, that's not metaphysical. That is physical because it's real and it exists. It's a thing, right? So that's how we define things as metaphysical or not is kind of where the confusion might lie.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Maybe there's a definition thing. To me, physical is the things that you can see, touch, like the five senses, basically. To me, that's what I call physical, right? Material. So when I talk about meta means beyond, right? Beyond the physical. To me, anything that has to do with that world where we cannot measure, touch with our instruments, devices, I call that the metaphysical. And what I see is that some of the religions talk about parts of this metaphysical world, and that's why it has so much weight, because a lot of people have had experiences and know there is something that is, by my definition, metaphysical, right? What happens is like there is so much junk that goes with that. So in that, let's say if you take 100% of a religion, let's say 75 or 80% of the religion is dogma and traditions that are like, and then maybe there is a 10 or 20% that talks about something that many people know in their inner being or have this intuition that is true. There is something there. And it's that 10 or 20% that actually connects all the religions and even or the spiritual traditions. That is the interesting part to me. That is the interesting part to me. And that's why I believe in the future we'll focus more on that 10% and it will become more like a thing,
in my post on religion, what I do say is that the core of all religions is humanism. That is the thread that connects them all. And as you said, it's basically humanism drenched in history, propaganda, dogma, and all that sort of stuff. So if you strip away all the religions of all that garbage, you essentially have humanism. Just a matter of which flavor do you want it in. Do you want Egyptian flavored or Christian flavored, right, and so on and so forth. You don't want to waste your time, or you don't find that part interesting. But don't get me wrong, the mythologies and the histories and stuff, they're interesting and they're useful to know and understand. But if you want to not take part of that, go straight for humanism. And I don't necessarily mean just secular humanism, but humanism at its core. And that is a thread that will travel throughout all of humanity. That will be the core. That should be the core of the human value system.
Right, 100%. And I think I would be so happy if we could all have that as our religion, you know. Yeah. Humanism. Okay, I subscribe to that 100%. And to me, it's just, I personally, you know, it's just my belief, right? Because I'm not 100% sure of anything. I do think there's like a physical or metaphysical war, right? And there's some laws there. And yeah, it's just, to me, it's humanism. It comes down to have something that goes beyond the physical, because the way I see it is like, if it's just all pure material stuff, if it's just molecules here bumping into each other, what is the point of morality? Like, there's not even like, it's just morality is just a convenience. I'll be moral as long as it just serves me, but I can turn around and like kill my neighbor just to steal their lunch if nobody sees me, you know, and I can get rid of that body, because who cares about morality? Like, there's nothing here. It's just pure molecules bumping into each other. But to me, there's something else. It's this humanism, at least the way I see it, that connects to other laws that I want to put out there, you know, and just say, hey, can we just agree to don't be so fanatical with our religions? If you like this flavor, like you said, Egyptian flavor, go for it. Wear your thing, you know. But that's not the important part of this. Maybe humanism is the important part.
Yep.
So I think, yes, I think sometimes atheists are a little angry, you know, like.
Yeah, the most vocal ones tend to be the militant atheists, and those are the ones who, yeah, are the most angry and talk the most vitriol towards it.
Yeah, and what bothers me sometimes, and I have to acknowledge that this bothers me a little bit, if they're angry, it doesn't bother me. They're just passionate, right? It just comes from this compassion. But what bothers me is this, when they're condescending, because they think that, oh, anybody believing into these things is kind of like full of it, is not educated, all of these things. But you just acknowledged to me, like, there are these experiments, there are these things out there that we don't know much about. And at least you did that, which I applaud. That's awesome. But many people would just, no, there's just nothing, there's just, and they are so condescending with these things. Like, if knew 100%, no, you don't know 100%. So you cannot be condescending. You cannot treat me like a child, like I'm an ignorant, uneducated child, because I believe there is more than meets the eye, you know. So that's something that bothers me a little bit, I had to admit. But
it's a journey into non-belief. A lot of people get to, like, the militant atheism is kind of one of the initial stages, because you realize the horrors inflicted by religion, and then the anger and the rage. And then as your understanding of religion, especially if you get into stuff that we study, right, the biopsychosocial effects of poverty and inequality and that sort of a thing, that really broadens your understanding of religion and its place, which is one of the reasons why I wrote my post, right? Religion overview, talking about the evolutionary foundations of religion and all that sort of a thing. It's just these, you know, militant atheists, they still at the beginning of their stage, non-belief, and they need to add nuance and complexity to their understanding of human social systems and that sort of a thing.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, let's just move on a little bit into resource-based economy, because this is fascinating. I really like it, but let's talk about the things that I find more problematic with it. I wish tomorrow we could all say like, yep, let's just have a resource-based economy and let's just use a scientific method to come up with the resources that we have, the needs that we have. Boom, we match those, and that's it, magic. But as we know, that is not as simple, right? And we have all this momentum, we have all these systems going on, and sometimes what I see with the resource-based economy proponents is like they oversimplify the transition, and to me it would be a little smarter and probably more realistic and pragmatic to kind of like transform a little bit first what we have right now, which is capitalism, right? If we can make it a little more humane, right, based more on this humanism, and have the players going on here like become aware of the issues that we have so that they make better choices, not just in production, but also in consumption, like that'll be a better, easier transition. But how do we go from 0 to 100, which is what resource-based economy always says? Yeah, let's just implement this thing. Like, I just see such a oversimplified thing.
Yeah, and I have a whole post on this topic, like how might a resource-based economy come into being? And I talk about this very thing because the transition point is the hardest thing. Going from where we are today to, implementation. Implementation is the easy part. We have what we need to do it. There's still research that we need to do to really get into it, but the hardest part is getting humanity ready for it. And the first case that I talk about is what you're talking about, is that eventually, humanity gets to the point where all countries are first world countries, basically are like the Nordic countries, right? They have that eco-humanistic values, and that becomes the perfect kind of jumping point into a resource-based economy. And that would take, I think take over 100 years to get to, assuming climate change doesn't murder everyone, which it will, and assuming the United States decides to no longer be the largest terrorist organization in the world. Those two things have to be a thing so that we have the potential to get there, to get to the values required to shift to a resource-based economy.
Right. And you touched on something that is interesting. You said values. Mm-hmm. And to me, values are the key. However, when I talk about these, I get very enthusiastic confrontation from especially the resource-based economy crowd. Because what they say always is, no, values, no, it's just systems. We just need to change the systems. Of course, I get that. But we cannot change the system. The system doesn't drop from the sky. We have to change the values. We need to start almost at the individual level to understand there's a problem. First, you need to understand there's a problem. Then you need to change your values. Because if you don't even do that step, you're not going to embrace a new system. And it's going to break apart as soon as there's a little bit of conflict. And that's why I talk so much about cooperation and these main goals of abundance, freedom, blah, blah, blah. Because first we have to have our union make it strong and understand we need these values. If we don't even have these values, forget it. How are we going to implement this big system? And the argument is always, well, it's that systems that create the values. Sure, I understand that we have this momentum and these systems that create these values, the patriotism, blah, 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 blah. But there's a point where something wakes up here, and you need to change at the individual level the value. This is other way. There's no other way around it. What do you think?
I see that too in the community. This is the chicken before the egg problem.
All right.
And you say is correct. Once the systems are implemented, that will create the conditions to generate the biopsychosocial response to get the values. Now, in my policies, Interstellar, New Deal, Global, I approach it from values first. And I have, much like you're saying, if we work on giving people the values needed, it makes it easier to implement the other things. But implementing the sort of values, the humanistic, eco-humanistic values within capitalism, especially in the United States, is very difficult because the system doesn't reward it. It actively works against it. But we should start with values because it needs to be done. My values are the values I put forward are currently the 8 philosophical pillars for peace, and I'm going to be expanding that here in a while once I get through the research and the writing on it.
Yeah, like you said, the system doesn't reward those values.
Yes.
We have to row against the river, upstream, but we have to do it. There's just no other way. Otherwise, we will be like pushed against in the same direction, and it takes 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5 people, blah blah blah, to create this chain reaction of people changing values. Maybe even small communities first, but you have to do it. There's no other way. The system is not going to change for you.
Well, obviously you can't do it another way, but it's best. It can't hurt to start with values first.
Mm-hmm.
It can only help, right? Because like you're saying, if you
right, exactly.
One group of people to embrace these values, that can very much help the process.
Right. I mean, the way I see it, it could happen otherwise is like, let's say we had like actually humanistic people at the top, powerful humanistic people at the top. They really could like change systems quickly, right? So that the whole mass of population could all of a sudden have different incentives to behave in a different way. But we know that the people on the top are almost all of them sociopaths, and they are there just to do their thing. So unfortunately, none of us that maybe are a little bit more up here have the power to implement the systems, the noble, right? So wonderful. Yeah, I think like you say, the chicken or the egg, but like you said, it never hurts to start with values. Yeah. So when I get so much pushback sometimes like, no, values are not, values are important, we have to change them. Why not, right? It doesn't hurt. So wonderful. Okay, fantastic. So I hope that we will get to research-based economy. I'm not attached to any labels. There are other systems out there too that are wonderful. At the end of the day, what we want is humanity living in prosperity and freedom and community, respecting the environment, making sustainable, right? Mm-hmm. And that's it. If you call it resource-based economy or you call it like X, Y, and Z, to me, just doesn't really matter, Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's the other issue that I think people get really attached to their project, to their resource-based economy, or no, this or that. No, you guys are BS because of. Wait a second. We're trying to do the same thing that you are. Can we just not like push together and help each other and sustain each other a little bit? That's kind of like what.
That's a result from capitalism, right? We work on our individual projects and we're not working collectively. And this is one of the issues that we really need as a community. In politics as well, we need an overarching organization which connects all of these projects, talking about resource-based economy and these other different facets of implementation. The more we can get people working together, the more productive we can be. We won't be recreating the wheel. We won't be wasting our time and resources, and we can learn more collectively about what this whole concept means, and collectively work together towards solutions that can start implementing them. It's like the bringing out the values and talking about that and spreading that.
100%. Since you touched on politics, why don't we transition into politics a little bit? I think you have written so much and talk about politics, and you say that why we need to vote in every single election. You say that, right? So,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let's just talk about this, right?
Sure.
Because I'm so disenchanted for politics. So many people are.
Yep.
And I think you have good points, and I would like to explore with you. So definitely, I do not want to vote in the national elections where it's just to me, it's like a puppy show. It's just totally ridiculous. Yeah. You almost cannot convince me once to vote at the local level, but I still have my hesitation. So why should I vote in every single election?
Well, much like you say, the national elections, well, like I talked about in that post, that we have a one-party system, right? So Democrat, Republican, does it really matter? Well, it does marginally. Republicans, the point of Republicans is to destroy everything. And it's the Democrats' job as the controlled opposition party to prevent progress, like the saying goes. the Democratic Party is where social movements go to die. We've seen that with Bernie Sanders. We've seen that with the Squad, right? They've become one with the board. There's no one left at the national level. So yeah, I get not giving a flying fuck about federal level because we have a real voice. Now, if you support third parties, that's a different thing, because then you can start giving voices to someone who might actually have a voice that matters to you, right? So I vote green whenever I can because that's the closest to my values.
Can I pause you right there before
Sure.
we go into the local level, maybe perhaps, if that's where your direction was? Because that's one thing that to me is just so flagrantly like anti-democratic, like coming from another country and seeing that at the national level, you have multiple choices. How are Americans happy with pretty much having a national debate of two parties? Like this whole Democratic, like Republican is just two options. So you can go to the grocery store and you have like 20 flavors for your soda, but you only have like two parties. Like in other countries, it's normal to have like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 like options and debates with multiple candidates.
Yes.
To me, it's just the most incredible thing. And they call it like so proudly democracy. Like, wait a second, you have two guys here, two options. I mean,
100%. And that's, again, part of that propaganda, right? Propaganda arm of the media and the movies and stuff, glorifying and so on and so forth. And then you've got, I talk about in that post as well, that the media is there controlling the Overton window, controlling the what is acceptable political discourse, and it limits it to that field of what is okay for the 1%, which is embodied in the two parties. Right. And it becomes about, your team versus my team. It's that competition. So
that division, right? Always.
Yeah, it's the division. Right. Yep.
Confrontational always.
Yeah. And that's really why it is that way. Now, in a different post, I talk about why we have the two-party system, and it comes from the Constitution. It's because we are a majoritarian democracy, winner takes all. That's why we have a two-party system. So that at a fundamental level on the Constitution has to change. So there, in my electoral reform page, I talk about that. There's 10 constitutional reforms that have to happen in order for us to even come close to having a democracy in here. And ranked choice voting is one of those. It's a huge part of it.
Right. Which comes down to me to this whole propaganda, like you said, which part of it is the Constitution. Like, wait a second, the Constitution is a book that a few guys wrote 100 whatever many years ago, and these guys were, let's say, pretty good and smart and all those things, but they didn't have a crystal ball into the future. They didn't know what's going to happen. Like, can we just not write a new constitution, or at least like amend this constitution to make it more to the times and more actual democracy, right? But here it's seen like as a, I mean, you don't touch the constitution. It's like this sacred thing, right? It's like, no, this is just a book. So, okay, cool. So let's talk about the state and the local level. Do you think like it makes sense to vote at the state level, or is still like the same show and at the local level? What do you think?
It's very similar because the money's there to support the Democrats and Republicans. It really depends on how your field is. Like in my state, in Wisconsin, we had not that this really matters, but we had a green person voted into Secretary of State. Not a big position, but
really? Okay.
Yeah, it's a start, right? If you can keep Republicans out, that's good. If you keep Democrats in, it's less harmful. It doesn't exacerbate the harm; it just perpetuates the harm. So it's a moderate case for harm reduction. But if you have someone else of value to vote for, a socialist, democratic socialist, green, right, that's definitely where you should go. Yeah, at the state level, that's kind of the way I approach it.
What do you say to a person that says, like, forget it, that's a waste of my day to go and vote, like, doesn't make any difference? I am feeding this system by voting there, and I just don't agree with the system. Why would I participate? Because that I'm acknowledging that is a system that I agree with when I vote. So I don't want to
Yeah.
be doing that.
I get it 100%. It's corrupt and broken as fuck. Agreed. But for me, it comes down to just harm reduction, or not harm exacerbation. You may not
Okay.
get what you want, just keeps Republicans out, even though Democrats are pretty shitty too, but less.
Do you think there's one Republican out there somewhere in the local level that has good ideas, or it's just an impossibility?
It's possible, but highly unlikely. In order to be conservative, you have to be a sociopath. That's a part of the package.
That's a harsh statement. That's a harsh statement right there.
It is, but that's the entire conservatism is separation. It's labeling. The core of conservative psychology is based off fear, and that will always lead towards harming of others because it leads to tribalism and so on and so forth. And that's pretty much what we've seen from Republicans for majority of history, except for when, like, majority of history in the U.S., except for when the Republicans were the liberal party, the more progressive party, like under FDR, was it? Something like that. Like the Democrats and Republicans have kind of gone back and forth between who's progressive and conservative over history to an extent. So it's just a matter of which one has the right values.
Right. Have you read or have you heard about this book called The Righteous Mind?
Oh my God, I love that book. Yes.
Okay, because he talks about this, right?
Yes.
And how different people emphasizes, and it's more important for them, this type of value or that type of values, you know. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a wonderful book, and I think a lot of people that are into politics should read it.
Yes.
Also because it will give them a perspective of the other person. I don't think most people are not evil. You know, most people are casting their votes, voting for Republicans or voting for the Democrats or whatever. They're really going with what they think is best. Mm-hmm. If we came from that perspective, also there will be less tension and more debate and more, collaboration, I think. So yeah, it's a really good book.
It is, and I would recommend everyone read it too. I wanted to read it forever. It took me years to get to it, but when I did, it was really great. It shows that conservatives have a more diverse value system, but it's very tribalistic, and then progressive people have a much more simple value system based off healing and harm and compassion and fairness. So it's really, I mean, that is kind of the core problem with conservatives versus progressives is that conservatives don't care about compassion politically or fairness. It's about the tribalism.
Yeah, it's more about the meritocracy, right? Where, hey, just take care of my business. You do your thing, freedom, right? You do your thing. I'll take care of me. And if I do what I think I have to do and I progress in life, that's on me. That's just, and everybody. But yeah, there's so much individualism there, right? Yes. And that's something that is very present here in the United States compared to many other countries and cultures. I see it here more than ever, anywhere really. The strong individualism, and that's goes against what humanity is a little bit, right? And even in religious terms and in religious values, like let's take Jesus, like helping the poor and just feeding the ones who need it, and that's how humanity races all of us together. We have to help each other, especially when we are in a position of strength, which here a lot of people have the power and the means, and you don't see that, right? A social network like you see in other countries where maybe they have less, unfortunately. So that rugged individualism, and it's just funny how they say, yeah, rugged individualism, and it's just their flag, but you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, okay. It's part of the politics of capitalism. The religion in this country is capitalism, and it's all about individualism. It's all about separation. It's about competition, and it's very much against collectivism, communalism, taking care of each other, and that's the systemic and structural violence inherent to the system.
Right, and that's kind of like what I talk in this cooperative versus competitive paradigm. And I don't put the label of politics, or I don't put the label of religion, because I don't want to alienate anybody from
Mhm.
thinking that way. I think if I call it competition, people will recognize that, hey, when we're
Yeah.
competing with each other, like, sure, you're gonna win sometimes, but I'm gonna win sometimes, and it's not gonna be the best for all in the long term. Can we just do it in a smarter way that win-win, sustainable in the long term? And I think people can get behind that idea of cooperating, much more than if I say, yeah, let's be Democrats, or let's be, you know, that's why, like, to me, politics is like a dead end, and I see a lot of people also on
Yeah.
social media talking about socialism and communism. Is like, you
Mhm.
guys need to move on from that. Like, nobody's gonna get behind that. Forget it. It's a tainted word. So can we just call it like X, Y, and Z? Maybe have the same values, but call it something else that is fresh
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
nobody has any emotion against it. To me, that's a little more strategic.
I think it is smarter to go that way. You're really taking the concept to be more abstract and less concrete, which is, yeah, gets rid of some of those problems.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're so emotional beings at the end of the day. And if my grandpa was really against communism, and all of a sudden I see this guy saying communism, let's go, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
forget it. I'm not gonna, you know.
Yeah. Conversation over.
Okay. Yeah. So uh, let's just talk about a couple more things if you have the
Yeah.
time
I've got
to
time.
wrap
Yeah.
it up. And it will be. I want to talk about sexuality at the end. I think that's really cool, interesting. What is this interstellar New Deal? Can you tell us about it?
Sure. Interstellar New Deal is my policy site. It is started out as a page on my blog when I was just putting together my ideas, and then eventually got to the point where we're 60 pages long, and I'm like, okay, I still need more room to write. Then I put it onto a site, and it's over 200 and some pages long currently. It's split up into 3 sections. The first part is philosophical foundations, of which my 8 philosophical pillars are the most important part of my entire policies. And the second part is global domestic policy, which is the normal kind of policies you would see on a political platform. It's very progressive. We're talking high minimum wage of, at this point, is probably almost close to $90,000. A low maximum wage of 9 times that, with 100% marginal tax rate at that maximum wage. So it's really aggressively attacking inequality, which is super important. It's like Green New Deal. It's like Green Party platform, but way beyond that because of my resource-based economy understanding of the way things are. And then part three of it is basically the shift to a resource-based economy.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I like that you have a transitional plan, and you cannot go from 0 to 100 like we said before. You're bringing like minimum wage and kind of like bringing everybody to the middle, so that people are not like scared about tomorrow, and they can thrive and be a person. And that inequality, we need to tackle inequality, is such a huge thing. And then from there, you have a better base to change the values. It's all synergistic, right? And then implement new systems. It's all the same, but we have to start somewhere.
Yes, 100%.
Right. Okay, because when you see the Interstellar New Deal, it's like, okay, are we talking here like Star Wars, or which I think you like as well, right?
Yes. Yep.
Am I
Star Wars,
correct?
Star Trek. Yep.
Speaking to that, like, do you think there is like more that they could tell us about UFOs and life outside these planets? And there's so much that has been coming out in the last few years, actually, like files from the Pentagon and things like that. And to me, it has a very interesting component, but I want you to talk about it.
Yeah, I have a post on this. I post on everything.
You have a post on anything, on everything, right?
Yeah. So have you seen the channel Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur?
I have not.
Oh my God, it's amazing. I was researching my post on the Kardashev scale, and I found out about this channel. He talks about interstellar travel, colonization, Fermi paradox, and all that sort of stuff. If you're interested in this sort of stuff, it is an amazing, amazing channel. So for me, yeah, I'm sure there aliens exist somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
but if they were able to, if they're spacefaring, we would know it. It's very hard to hide that, unless it's outside of places that we can't currently see. So the likelihood that we have aliens here is very, very, very small. Just even getting through the Fermi paradox kind of conversation. It may have been that the likelihood that there's an alien species that is coterminous with us at this point in time is very unlikely. Most likely, if there are going to be, they may have already come and gone, or they may be coming up. So yeah, not into. I don't really think that there are aliens currently on the planet or anywhere near us.
Right, but you said something interesting. You said like
Mhm.
we would know about it, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But some people say we know about it. Here it is. We know it. So who is the we know about it? Like, are you speaking about the news, like conventional news saying, yes, ladies and gentlemen, here it is. We know it. Because a lot of people are saying, yes, we know about it. We had like proof in this base and that base. I don't know if you've seen the documentary by Dr. Greer. They even have like a little guy, you know, that they study their DNA. Did you see that?
No.
Well, I mean, to me, it's like some people know about it. So now the debate is like, okay, who needs to acknowledge this to then agree? Everybody agrees that, yes, we know about it. Like, did you see what I'm saying here?
We don't know that they know. They just have something that they can't explain. And like in my post on this, I talk about that belief in aliens or alien conspiracies is the religion for a scientific age, trading magical religion for a technological religion.
So what do you say about these guys that had like this little specimen of?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just something you can explain. And that
something that we cannot explain
currently.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. That's fair enough. There are things that we cannot explain. I like that approach. I just don't like when people say, "Yeah, no, there's no aliens. There is no life outside these. We have things that we cannot explain." I'll agree with that. Okay, good. Okay. And then you talk about so many things in your page, right? Literally like everything under the stars, which is cool. Everything that is important to humanity, you know, not just everything. And you also have like a a section that you talk about sexuality, you know, which is this interesting. It's part of the it's part of the system that we have, right? So I would like you to maybe talk about this a little bit, if you don't mind, just your policies and how do you see sexuality right now, and where would you like to see sexuality in the future, maybe in a resource-based economy or in a world that you like to see?
Sure. So so gay marriage is what got me in politics first. And then as I was researching that, actually the first post I wrote on this was prostitution, because right about that time was when change.org came out, like 2007. So I was doing research on my gay marriage thing. I found change.org and prostitution. So I started researching that and I wrote that. Then that
you said change.org? Sorry, you said change.org?
Yes, change.org, yeah.
And they had a petition on prostitution to make it legal, or what was the initiative?
I think it was against it. It's linked to
or against it?
I think, yeah.
Okay.
And that got me to thinking about it. And then that also got me into polygamy, researching that, and then polyamory. So I wrote pages on kind of all four of these sorts of topics. Now, the issue we have today, of course, is that we are a patriarchal society, which is oppressive to women and women empowerment. And there is this book that I read. It was really hard to read, but it was really good. It's like Sex, Crime, and Punishment for 4,000 Years. And this guy just goes through just all of the recorded, sexual crimes and their punishments. Almost all of it was women and sexual minorities.
Wow. How do you have the guts to read that?
Oh, I know. Well, at that time, that was my
part of your research. I understand, but
right. It was tough. Because he doesn't sugar it, coat it or anything. He just states this is, like starting with Hammurabi's law, right? This is the law.
Yeah.
And these are the recorded cases. This is what happened. It was a giant ass book. I mean, I went through that. And it really kind of drives home how patriarchal and oppressive our society is to women and sexual minorities. It's just it's just so bad. And and like prostitution itself is a victimless crime. Well, when you get into prostitution, you have to have the first conversation that sex trafficking and prostitution aren't the same thing. They are two different things, right? If someone's a prostitute, they aren't necessarily sex trafficked, because some places it's legal and some people enjoy sex and enjoy that sort of a thing, right? So, and part of the reason why it is illegal is because it can empower women. Because our religion, specifically Christianity, is patriarchal and oppressive to women. If you get into divine feminine symbology and symbolism, if you look at the Old Testament, specifically the Garden of Eden tales, what Eve, the punishments, the symbolism in there is all about taking the divine feminine and making it negative. Like women were held as holy and sacred and divine because they give birth, because they bleed for 7 days and don't die, right? They're the life givers. The parts of symbolism was like snakes, seed-bearing fruits, trees, right? So all the things that women were, that were symbols of divine feminine, were made negative. And that's kind of the core of what Christianity built itself upon, patriarchy, the oppression of women. So, yeah, so I think part of the shift to a resource-based economy will be casting that off. In order to be a resource-based economy, it has to be egalitarian, right? And large amounts of equity, especially for women. So once we get to a resource-based economy, you know, we get rid of that patriarchy, get rid of the oppression, and then we should have a lot more freedom. And I bet a lot of people that are currently involved in sex work won't choose to be. But I also see that because they'll actually have a choice. And also, I think something more along the lines of polyamory will be the norm, where you get, where your love and your intimacy isn't limited to the patriarchal notion of monogamy and that sort of a thing. And I think much like, Jacques talks about, Jacques Fresco, that extensionalism would be kind of an extension of polyamory. That he says that like a common phrase would be "you extend me," which I think is a bit clinical. I'm not a fan of it, but it's about taking people that are valuable to you and your experience and honoring that sort of a thing. And like if you look at Greek has like 7 different types of love, words for different types of love. So bringing something like that and having words for and embodying and accepting and embracing these different forms of intimacy that we can have with different people in our lives, I think that's going to be very key, because it's about bringing people together. It's about connections.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's really cool that in Greek there are 7 different words or concepts, right, about love.
Yeah. Yep.
Fantastic. So to finalize the dialogue today, would you share with us something that you would like to see in the new year, 2023, and also maybe like a long-term big goal that you would like to also see and experience and help to accomplish for society, kind of like more like a long-term thing?
Well, obviously my policies are kind of where it's at, but nothing I write about will ever come to pass because it doesn't serve the rich. I mean, we are a corporal plutoligarchy, right? The corporations, the rich, and the few control and own everything, and they're not going to willingly cede any power, especially anything that they don't benefit or profit from. And then making life better for people, there's very little profit in. So it's going to be very hard to have any sort of long-term change happen without tearing down the millionaires and billionaires and decreasing inequality. I guess I would say decreasing inequality would be the one thing I would like to see in the new year. Raising the minimum wage would be a good start. If by some bizarre reason the United States would start with housing first, as a model, that would be good. Those would be two really good things to start with, but highly unlikely.
So the new year, you would like to see that inequality come down, right?
Yeah.
But however, in the long term, you don't see your big dreams, your policies like happening, not even 5,000 years from now. You think that humanity is doomed?
Oh, yeah. Just but by virtue of climate change, the next 100+ years, almost a likeness might be gone.
Okay, it's good that we end up with that because I disagree with that. I
know.
Obviously, there are things that we're doing to the environment which are not good, and we desperately need to change that. But I think humanity is very resilient. The environment is also very resilient, and there will be places on the planet that even with increased temperature. And this full disclosure, I have a master's degree in environmental science, so it's not like I'm like newbie to this. I know my stuff. So with increased energy, increased heat, there are areas of the planet that will be dramatically increase their biodiversity. So I'm not necessarily just talking about humans. I'm just talking about biodiversity. So now, is it good that we are pumping like CO2 into the environment and all these pollutants, all these things? No, obviously we need to transition into something else. But I don't see it in my crystal ball that we're gonna be gone in 150 years. So I'm a little more positive there. And
I'm 100% doomer, but I hope you're right.
good. and then also that I also see your policies coming to fruition at some point. I don't know if it will take hundreds or thousands, but somehow, I mean, at least I see the world right now, and I think it's better off than 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago. I mean, I know there is a lot of conflict, there is a lot of pain and suffering, but gosh, we've come along, like we've done a lot too, like. So I think in the future, it's not gonna come easy, but I think I'm positive in this. I think that we will reach a point where your policies, most of them, will come to pass. So that's my wish.
I like your world better.
Okay, awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, James. That was so interesting. I hope that whoever is listening to this also found it interesting and inspiring. I encourage you to keep writing about things. I also encourage you to maybe put the interstellar deal and a few other things into a book, you know, maybe that you can publish. That would be wonderful. That could be maybe a good goal for the new year. And thanks again. I hope that we can keep interacting online and pushing ideas and getting connected with others as well.
Yeah, thank you for the time. Thank you for the offer. This is amazing, and I very much appreciate this conversation. I don't have anyone to talk to, so this was fun.
Fantastic. Thank you, James.